Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler was born on April 20th, 1889, in Braunau am Inn, a small town on the border between Austria and Germany. His father, Alois Hitler, was a customs official, self-made, socially ambitious, and by most accounts a brutal man. Alois beat his son regularly and with severity. Hitler later told his secretary that he had counted 32 blows during one beating, and that he had taught himself not to cry so as not to give his father the satisfaction. "I never loved my father," he said, "but I feared him." Alois had wanted his son to follow him into the civil service. Adolf wanted to be an artist. The conflict between them was total and never resolved. Alois died suddenly of a pleural hemorrhage in January 1903 when Adolf was 13. Hitler wept at his grave. The man he feared was gone, but the pattern had already been set. His mother Clara, by contrast, was devoted to him, perhaps excessively so. She had lost 3 children to diphtheria before Adolf's birth, and she protected and indulged him in ways that created a profound tension. A boy simultaneously crushed by one parent and placed on a pedestal by the other. After his mother died of breast cancer in December 1907, Hitler was 18 and completely adrift. He moved to Vienna, applied twice to the Academy of Fine Arts, and was rejected both times. He spent the next several years in genuine poverty, sleeping in homeless shelters, selling small paintings on the street, absorbing the intense anti-Semitic ideology that saturated Vienna's political culture at the time. He later wrote in Mein Kampf that Vienna was where his worldview was formed. Historians debate exactly how and when his anti-Semitism crystallized, but the city's politics unquestionably left a deep mark. What emerged from this childhood was a man who had learned that the world was a place of cruelty and rejection, where softness was punished, where you either dominated or were dominated, and where an enemy, an identifiable, blameworthy enemy, could explain everything that had gone wrong. Joseph Stalin. Joseph Stalin was born Iosif Jugashvili on December 18, 1878, in Gori, a small town in what is now Georgia, then part of the Russian Empire. His father, Bessarion, known as Crazy Beso, was a cobbler whose small workshop failed, leaving the family in poverty. As his business collapsed, Beso became an alcoholic who beat his wife and his son with enough violence that, according to accounts recorded by Stalin's mother, the boy once had blood in his urine for days after a beating. By the time Stalin was around 5 years old, his mother Ekaterine had taken him and moved out, cycling through 9 rented rooms. Beso eventually abandoned the family entirely, drifting to Tbilisi to work in a shoe factory. Stalin's mother, deeply religious and fiercely ambitious for her son, wanted him to become a priest. She enrolled him at the Gori Church School in 1888, where he excelled academically, sang in the choir, and wrote Georgian poetry. His childhood was not without warmth. His mother's devotion was genuine and total, and she remained the one constant in his early life. But the physical damage accumulated. A smallpox infection around age 6 left his face permanently scarred. A carriage accident at age 12 caused a lifelong disability in his left arm, which remained shorter than the right and slightly withered, a source of deep personal shame throughout his life. He would later take meticulous care to ensure he was always photographed from the right side, and was known to have people retouched out of photographs who drew attention to the asymmetry. He won a scholarship to the Tiflis Theological Seminary and enrolled in 1894. There, in the library, he discovered Karl Marx. By 1899, he had been expelled for revolutionary activity. The path from there to the Gulag is long and complex, but the boy who grew up without a father, physically damaged, scarred inside and out, holding his pain behind a face that showed nothing, that boy was already forming. Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong was born on December 26, 1893, in the village of Shaoshan in Hunan Province, China. Unlike Hitler or Stalin, he was not born into poverty. His father, Mao Yichang, had pulled himself up from peasant origins to become one of the wealthiest farmers in the region, owning land, employing laborers, trading grain. By the standards of rural Hunan, the Mao family was comfortable. But wealth did not soften Mao Yichang. He was a harsh disciplinarian who beat his children. Mao later described his father as a stern disciplinarian who would strike him and his siblings for perceived wrongdoings. The conflict between them was relentless. Yichang wanted Mao to work the fields, learn the family business, and stay rooted in the village. Mao wanted books, rebellion, and the wider world. At 13, his father arranged a marriage for him with a girl from another landowning family. Mao refused to acknowledge it as real and eventually simply walked away. The girl died 2 years later. Mao never lived with her. Mao ran away from home repeatedly. He later said that his father's method of punishment had taught him an important lesson, that submission achieved nothing and that only public resistance changed anything. As a teenager, He discovered that when he pushed back openly against his father, making his grievances visible in front of others, his father backed down. He had learned, in the most personal possible laboratory, that power was a performance and that showing weakness invited more punishment. These were the lessons he would apply for the rest of his life at national scale. The man who sent tens of millions to their deaths in famines and political campaigns was already visible in the boy who refused to bow to his father's authority and walked away from a life he hadn't chosen. Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was born on April 28, 1937, in the small village of Al-Auja near Tikrit, in what was then British-administered Iraq. His father disappeared or died before Saddam was born. His older brother died of cancer around the same time. His mother, Subha, fell into severe depression and was unable to care for her newborn. At age 3, Saddam was sent to live with his maternal uncle, Khairallah Talfa. When he was eventually returned to live with his mother, she had remarried. His stepfather, Ibrahim Hassan, was by all accounts a brutal man who despised Saddam, treating him as a burden, beating him, using him for labor, withholding schooling. Relatives later recalled Saddam herding sheep and being sent to steal from neighbors' fields. He had no formal education during these years. Around the age of 10, he ran away, returning to Baghdad to live again with Khairallah Talfa. Talfa was a very different figure. He was a veteran Arab nationalist, deeply anti-British, and a man of strong ideological conviction. He had served prison time for his role in the 1941 pro-Nazi coup attempt against the British-backed Iraqi government. He fed Saddam a worldview that the Arabs had been humiliated by foreign powers, that only strength commanded respect, and that the strong had the right to do what they would. He even authored a pamphlet, Three Whom God Should Not Have Created, Persians, Jews, and Flies, that functioned as a kind of ideological primer in Saddam's adolescence. From Talfa, Saddam absorbed a father figure. From his stepfather, he had absorbed what it felt like to be nobody, unmissed, unschooled, unloved, and replaceable. The combination was specific and potent, the humiliation of one childhood and the nationalist ideology of an adoptive mentor who taught him that humiliation was something you could answer with violence. Kim Jong-il. Kim Jong-il was born on February 16, 1941, in the Soviet Union, where his father, Kim Il-sung, was stationed with Soviet military forces during the Second World War. He grew up in a world with no equivalent in human history, a country in which his father was not merely a leader, but a god. Kim Jong-il's childhood was defined not by deprivation, but by its opposite. He was the son of the great leader, the child of a man who had fought the Japanese, returned as a hero backed by Soviet power, and built himself into a mythological figure. The North Korean state produced literature claiming his birth on the slopes of Mount Paektu, the most sacred mountain in Korean tradition, was accompanied by a double rainbow and a bright new star. He was, from infancy, the heir to a deity. His mother, Kim Jong-suk, revered in North Korea as an anti-Japanese heroine, died when Jong-il was 7 from complications of pregnancy. His father remarried. Jong-il and his stepmother reportedly had a difficult relationship. During the Korean War, he was moved to China for safety, separated from his father for years during a conflict being fought in his family's name. What North Korea did to Kim Jong-il as a child was something specific and strange. It built him a self that had no relationship to reality. He was told from birth that his family was extraordinary, chosen, heroic, destined. The gap between what the mythology claimed and what he actually was got bridged entirely by power. He didn't need to be competent. He didn't need to be kind. He didn't need to be anything other than the son of the man who controlled everything. When Kim Il-sung formally designated his son as successor in 1980, he handed him a country of 20 million people to rule. Jong-il had never faced an election, a criticism, an open rival, or a consequence. He had grown up inside a system designed entirely to confirm whatever he already believed about himself. He died in December 2011. His son Kim Jong-un took over, having grown up in an even more hermetically sealed version of the same mythology. The dynasty is now in its 3rd generation. Look at these 5 men together, and something becomes visible. Hitler, humiliated by a violent father, rejected by the world, stateless and penniless in his early 20s, consumed by a need to explain his failure through the existence of an enemy. Stalin, beaten, scarred, abandoned by his father, physically damaged, taught from childhood that pain was something you endured without expression. Mao, dominated by a harsh father against whom direct rebellion was the only tool that worked. Saddam, born to an absent father, brutalized by a stepfather, rescued and radicalized by an uncle who taught him that power was the only thing that mattered. Kim Jong-il, insulated from all reality by a system of total mythology built by his father, handed absolute power, having never once had to earn it or answer for anything. None of these childhoods made these men inevitably into what they became. Millions of people lived through worse and built lives of quiet dignity. But in each case, something specific was installed early, a particular understanding of what power was, what weakness meant, and what the world owed them. And when those men found themselves at the center of systems with no checks on what they could do, that early installation ran. History doesn't repeat exactly, but the template for how a person becomes capable of atrocity, that template is older than any of them, and it starts long before they ever took a single step toward power. If you'd like to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and feel free to drop suggestions for the next video in the comments.